The day he realized the house was never his. It wasn't loud at first. It wasn't a scream in the driveway. It wasn't shattered glass. It wasn't even a slammed door. It was a pause. A tiny, quiet pause. Right after he said the words he'd been saying for years like they were scripture. "I'm on the deed." He said it in my foyer, with his coat still on, with a stranger behind him holding a clipboard, and with the kind of confidence that only belongs to men who've never had to check if they're right. I looked at him, and I didn't correct him, because I'd learned something painful, something expensive. When a man builds his whole identity on ownership, you don't argue him out of it. You let the paper do it. And on that day, the paper was already waiting. It started the same way my nightmare started after the divorce. Bright daylight, ordinary sounds, my daughter humming upstairs while the world tried to collapse. I was standing in the kitchen with a half-finished mug of coffee and a sink full of dishes that didn't care about my legal battles. My 9-year-old Riley was in her room picking an outfit, dragging hangers across the closet rod like nothing in life could ever be taken from her. That sound, metal on metal, was the sound of innocence. My phone rang, unknown number. I stared at it, that familiar dread tightening around my ribs. Unknown numbers had become a new species in my world. Investors, buyers, county people who spoke like they already knew your social security number. I answered anyway. "Miss Hart?" a woman asked. "Yes," I said, already bracing. "This is April Knox with First Harbor Bank, Title and Fraud Prevention. Do you have a moment?" Fraud prevention. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like missing a step on a staircase. Yes, I said. "Okay," April continued, voice careful but firm. "I'm calling regarding the property at 47 Briarwood Lane. We received a request for payoff information, and we received documentation to initiate a cash-out transaction using that property as collateral. I need to confirm. Did you authorize anyone to act on your behalf?" My throat went dry. No. There was a pause, not surprise, recognition. "I thought that might be your answer," April said softly. "I'm going to ask you something direct. Have you granted your ex-husband, Mr. Gavin Rourke, power of attorney?" My entire body went cold. Gavin. Hearing his name in a bank employee's mouth felt like hearing a threat in a language the world actually took seriously. "No," I said, voice sharp. "Absolutely not." "Okay," April said. "Then you need to know this. Someone submitted a limited power of attorney with your name and attempted to change your mailing address and online profile information. We froze the request. But there is more. There is also a home equity line of credit secured by your property that is currently delinquent." I stared at the countertop like it might stop the words from entering my life. "A HELOC?" I whispered. "Yes," she said. "Opened 16 months ago. The current balance is $86,912. My knees went weak. I grabbed the edge of the sink. "That's not possible," I said. "I never opened a line of credit." "I understand," April replied. "That's why we're treating this as potential identity theft and loan fraud. I need you to come in today with identification and any documents you have regarding the divorce and the title. And please, do not confront anyone you suspect. Let the bank handle the investigation process." Do not confront. That was the legal and financial anchor, right there, within a minute. Not a rumor, not a threat, not Gavin's voice in my ear, the bank's voice, telling me my home had debt I didn't create, and someone was trying to use my name like a key. I swallowed, forced air into my lungs, and looked up the stairs. Riley, I called, keeping my voice bright. 5 minutes, sweetie. Okay, she yelled back, cheerful. I hung up and stood in my kitchen shaking. Then I did what mothers do when the ground moves under them. I kept the routine alive. I made toast. I poured juice. I zipped a backpack. Riley came down in a denim jacket, hair still damp, smiling like she'd already forgotten whatever she'd been worried about. "Can we do pancakes Saturday?" she asked. My throat tightened. "Yeah," I said. "We can." She looked at my face too long. "You're doing that thing," she said, "because kids notice patterns more than adults do." "What thing?" I asked softly. "You're smiling with your mouth, but not with your eyes," she said. I swallowed. "I'm just tired," I told her, and in a way it was true. I was tired in the deepest place. The place where you're tired of having to prove you deserve your own life. I dropped her off at school, kissed her forehead, and waited until she ran inside before I let my hands start shaking again. Then I drove to First Harbor Bank with both hands locked on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like a countdown. Every car behind me felt like a shadow. At the bank, April met me in the lobby, mid-30s, hair pulled back, eyes calm in the way calm people look when they've seen too many disasters and learned how to keep their voice steady anyway. She led me into a small office and closed the door. "Ms. Hart," she said gently, "I'm going to show you what we have, and I need you to tell me what is true." She slid a folder across the desk. On top was the power of attorney. My name, almost right. Mara instead of Marai, one letter missing like someone thought details were optional. My address correct, my birth date correct. The signature, close enough to scare a stranger. Wrong enough to make my skin crawl. April tapped the notary stamp. "This commission number doesn't match the state registry format," she said. "That's one of the reasons our system flagged it." She flipped to the next page. HELOC statement. The balance sat there in black ink like a bruise. "I never saw this," I whispered. "I believe you," April said. "We have the closing package. Someone signed. Someone provided identification. Someone directed the funds." My mouth went dry. Was it me? April shook her head slowly. "We can't make a final determination without formal process. But our internal review indicates the signer may not match you. We also have branch surveillance." Surveillance. That word made my pulse jump. April continued. "I'm also seeing that the disbursement account for the HELOC is not your checking account. It is tied to an external institution. We're working to identify ownership." I stared at her. So someone took money against my home and sent it somewhere else. April's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "Yes." My chest burned with anger so hot it tasted like metal. I didn't have to guess who. Gavin had been talking about equity for years, like it was a jar he deserved to reach into. He was the kind of man who used financial words like armor. He wasn't a banker, but he liked sounding like one. He liked making people feel stupid for asking questions, because questions threatened the one thing he cared about: control. When we were married, he'd say things like, "Debt is leverage, and banks respect men who move fast, and paper is just paper." And I had believed him, not because I was dumb, but because I loved him and wanted to believe he wouldn't use my trust as a tool. We met in Austin years ago when I was a junior accountant, and he was a charismatic project manager at a construction firm. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room, like you were being chosen. He remembered small details. He showed up with coffee. He said he wanted a family, and he said it like a promise. We married fast. We bought the house on Briarwood 2 years later. It wasn't huge, but it felt like a fresh start. A 2-story with a porch swing, creaky stairs, and an oak tree that dropped leaves in perfect spirals every fall. My parents helped with the down payment, not because we couldn't afford it, but because my father believed in building stability for grandchildren. Gavin smiled, thanked them, and then told everyone at his job that he bought a home like he'd done it alone. My credit was stronger. My income was steady. Gavin's income depended on overtime, bonuses, and his ability to talk himself into the next raise. The mortgage was in both our names at first. And the deed? The deed was the thing Gavin talked about like a crown. My name's on it, he'd say whenever he wanted to win an argument. So you can't just decide things. The first time I realized he meant it as a threat was the night I told him I wanted to separate. Riley was 6. She was asleep upstairs with a nightlight shaped like a moon glowing against her wall. Gavin stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, expression too calm. "You're not leaving," he said. "I am," I replied, voice shaking. "This isn't working." He smiled slowly. "You can leave," he said, "but you're not keeping the house." The way he said it, not as a fear, as a promise. That was the beginning of the war. The divorce itself was ugly but quiet, the way divorces are when one person wants to keep their public image clean. Gavin didn't scream in court. He smiled. He shook hands. He told the judge he just wanted what was fair. Then he went outside and told his mother I was a thief. He told mutual friends I was hiding money. He told Riley, once on speakerphone, that Mommy is trying to take Daddy's house. I corrected her gently later, but the damage was done. A child doesn't forget the first time she thinks her home is negotiable. My attorney, Lauren Ashford, had warned me early. "He's going to try to weaponize the house," Lauren said. "He'll threaten sale. He'll threaten partition. He'll threaten eviction. You need to protect your position." "How?" I asked. Lauren asked one question that changed everything. "Did anyone contribute separate funds to the down payment?" she asked. "My parents," I said. "A large portion." Lauren nodded. "Then we need to find the paperwork." We found it. Wire confirmation, gift letter, a separate property acknowledgement my father had insisted Gavin sign at closing. Gavin had laughed about it, calling my father paranoid, and signed without reading because he believed the world worked the way he wanted, not the way it was written. Lauren also found something else, something Gavin had forgotten. 6 months after we bought the house, when Gavin's credit dipped after a missed business payment, the lender required a corrective deed and a title update to match underwriting conditions. It was boring, administrative, easy to ignore. Gavin ignored it. But I didn't, because Lauren made sure I didn't. The corrective deed had a clause that clarified the property as my separate asset to the extent of the down payment contribution, with Gavin's interest limited and waiving partition rights, in exchange for an agreed reimbursement schedule in the divorce decree. It wasn't magic. It was boring legal language. But boring legal language is what saves you when someone tries to rewrite your life. The divorce decree finalized in June. The judge approved the agreement. I retained the home subject to mortgage. Gavin received a structured payout over 2 years for limited equity reimbursement, and he waived any immediate claim to forced sale, any partition action, and any unilateral encumbrance rights. His access to the home was restricted. Communication was through counsel. Gavin walked out smiling like he'd found a loophole anyway. "You'll slip," he whispered to me in the hallway. "You always do." I didn't answer, because my goal wasn't to out-talk him. My goal was to out-document him. Now, sitting in April's office at the bank, I realized Gavin hadn't been waiting for me to slip. He'd been creating debt behind my back and hoping I'd collapse before I could prove it. April had me freeze my credit, change my online banking credentials, and sign a fraud statement. She gave me a fraud reference number. She also gave me a warning. "Once someone realizes the bank is involved," she said softly, "they may escalate. Please be careful." I nodded, heart pounding. "I will." I left the bank with a folder that felt like it weighed 50 pounds. In the car, my phone buzzed. A text from Gavin. "You can't hide behind paperwork forever. The house is mine." My stomach twisted. He didn't know the bank had called me, but he could feel something shifting, because men like Gavin feel when their control is slipping. My first instinct was to reply, to say, "You're lying," to say, "The bank is investigating," to say, "You can't do this." But Lauren's voice echoed in my head, "Don't feed him." So I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Lauren instead. Her response came quick. "Good. Keep logging. No direct contact." That night, Gavin escalated exactly the way Lauren predicted. He didn't call me. He didn't email me. He didn't show up with a fight that could be recorded easily. He sent other people. The next day, a man in a reflective vest knocked on my door with a clipboard. "Appraisal," he said. "No appointment," I replied through the chain. "It's ordered," he insisted. "By who?" I asked. He hesitated. "The owner." I smiled without warmth. "You're looking at the owner," I said. "Leave." He frowned, annoyed, but he left. 2 hours later, another call from a cash buyer. "We can close in 7 days. No repairs. No agents." I hung up. Another number called. Foreclosure can be stressful. Foreclosure. That word wasn't accidental. It was Gavin's favorite poison, planting fear in strangers' mouths so it would sound more real. Every 3 or 4 days, something new. A lien notice in the mail that turned out to be a fake letterhead with wrong fonts. A certified envelope addressed to me with a county seal that was slightly blurred, like someone printed it at home. A message from Gavin's mother. "You can't keep what belongs to my son." And then, the worst. Riley. Riley came home from school quiet, her backpack dropping to the floor like it was heavy. "Dad says we're moving," she whispered. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I crouched in front of her, forcing my voice steady. "Sweetheart, who told you that?" "Dad," she said, eyes wet. "He said the house isn't yours. He said you're just staying until the bank takes it." Bank. He used the bank like a monster in a bedtime story. I swallowed my rage. "Riley," I said softly, "your dad is saying things because he's angry. We are not moving." "How do you know?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because the bank called me first," I wanted to say. "Because the bank froze his attempt," I wanted to say. "Because the bank is building a case," I wanted to say. But children don't need adult fear. So I gave her the simplest truth. "Because I'm handling it," I said, "and because we have help." She nodded, but her eyes stayed scared. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and opened a binder. I labeled it in thick black marker, Briar Wood File. Inside, I organized everything: text messages, call logs, fake notices, doorbell camera screenshots. Every time Gavin tried to create pressure, I turned it into evidence. Lauren said, "Patterns win cases." So we built the pattern. In October, April at the bank called Lauren and me on speaker. "We have confirmed that the HELOC was not initiated through Ms. Hart," April said. The signer was male. The identification used had her name, but the photo was not her. The notary seal is invalid. We also traced the disbursement pathway, and the recipient account appears linked to Rourke Development Services, LLC. Gavin's company. My hands went numb around my mug. April continued. We are filing a suspicious activity report. We are also cooperating with law enforcement and can provide certified copies and surveillance stills pursuant to subpoena. Subpoena. Certified copies. Surveillance. Gavin could talk his way out of gossip. He could not talk his way out of video. Lauren looked at me, eyes sharp. Now, she whispered after the call. Now we stop defending and start controlling the timeline. Controlling the timeline meant something simple. We filed first. Lauren filed an emergency motion for protective orders and sanctions in family court based on harassment, attempted encumbrance, and documented fraud activity. She also filed a request to enforce the waiver and reimbursement schedule, asking the judge to clarify that Gavin had no ownership interest to force sale, no authority to encumber, and no right to present himself as an owner to third parties. Gavin responded by doing what Gavin always did. He performed. He filed his own motion to compel sale, claiming I was hoarding equity and refusing to cooperate with fair distribution. He attached screenshots of Zillow estimates like they were legal arguments. He also showed up at my porch one bright Thursday in late November with a locksmith. That was the day he realized, but he didn't realize yet. Not when he stepped out of his truck with that smug smile. Not when he nodded at the locksmith like he was a king granting access. Not when he tapped the folder in his hand like it was a weapon. I opened the door with the chain on. Gavin smiled wider. "Move aside," he said. "I'm taking my house back." The locksmith shifted awkwardly. "Ma'am, I was told there's an order." Gavin interrupted. "There is." He held up a paper with a seal that looked official at first glance. My stomach clenched, but my eyes went to the case number. Wrong digits. Cheap mistake. I lifted my phone and started recording. Gavin's smile twitched. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm documenting," I said calmly, like my attorney told me to. The locksmith glanced between us. "Ma'am, if you're saying this isn't valid..." "It's not," I said, "and I'm requesting you leave my property." Gavin leaned closer, voice low. "You can't do this. I'm on the deed." I looked at him with a calm that wasn't calm. It was discipline. "You're not," I said softly. He laughed loud. "Please. You don't even know what you're talking about." The locksmith cleared his throat. "Sir, I'm going to verify this. I can't change locks without a real order." Gavin's hand shot out toward the locksmith's phone. "No." The locksmith stepped back, suddenly wary. "I'm verifying." He put the clerk's office on speaker and read the case number. The clerk paused, then said, "That's not a possession order. That's a small claims case from 2020. Silence. Gavin's face shifted, just a fraction. The locksmith swallowed. "Sir, I'm leaving." Gavin's voice sharpened. "No, wait. She's lying. The deed..." "I'm not getting involved," the locksmith said, backing away. When the locksmith left, Gavin turned to me, eyes burning. "You think you're clever," he hissed, "but you can't erase me. The house is mine." I kept recording. "Leave," I said. He leaned closer. "Or what?" "Or I call the police," I said, voice steady. "And I file another violation." He laughed like the word police didn't mean anything. Then he walked off my porch and muttered, "See you in court." He meant it. And court was where he thought he could still win with swagger. The hearing was set for mid-December. In the weeks before, Gavin escalated again, every few days, like clockwork. He sent someone to take photos of my house. He reported me to the HOA for unapproved holiday decorations. He tried to contact Riley's school and request an unscheduled pickup. The school called me, voice nervous. "Ms. Hart, Mr. Rourke is here and says he has paperwork." My blood went cold. "He does not," I said. "He has no custody time today. Do not release my child." I drove there, heart racing, and saw him standing in the office, smiling at the receptionist like he belonged. When he saw me, he spread his hands. I just wanted to see my daughter. I didn't argue. I asked the receptionist to call the resource officer. Gavin's smile vanished. He backed up, suddenly reasonable. Because bullies love soft targets, not witnesses. That was escalation, pressure, fear, control attempts. And all of it went into the file. December arrived, courtroom 4C, Honorable Judge Renee Calder. Gavin showed up in a pressed suit, hair perfect, smile rehearsed. He brought his mother, Elaine, who sat behind him like a second attorney made of judgment. He also brought a new lawyer, slick, loud, confident, named Travis Holt. Travis opened with a flourish. "Your Honor, my client has been unlawfully denied access to jointly owned property. Ms. Hart refuses to list the home and is attempting to conceal equity. We request an order compelling sale and immediate possession." Gavin smirked at me like the outcome was already stamped. Lauren stood, calm. "Your Honor," she said, "before any discussion of sale, we need to address the fact that this property is not jointly owned in the manner Mr. Rourke claims. Additionally, we need to address a fraudulent HELOC opened against this property, ongoing identity theft attempts, and harassment." Travis chuckled lightly. "Allegations," he said. "There's no proof." Gavin leaned toward Travis and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "She's dramatic." Judge Calder's eyes narrowed. "Ms. Ashford," she said to Lauren, "do you have documentation?" Lauren nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. We have a sealed submission from First Harbor Bank, including fraud unit reference number, preliminary determinations, and subpoena-ready exhibits. We also have the recorded corrective deed, and the divorce decree language waiving partition and clarifying separate property contribution." Judge Calder held out her hand. "Bring me the file." The clerk walked forward with a sealed envelope. My heart hammered. Gavin's smirk held for about 2 seconds, and then it began to crack. Judge Calder broke the seal and opened the bank file. Paper rustled. She read silently for a long time. Long enough that Gavin shifted in his seat. Long enough that Travis stopped smiling. Long enough that Elaine's mouth tightened. Then Judge Calder looked up and said, "Mr. Rourke, do you own an entity called Rourke Development Services, LLC?" Gavin stood slowly. "Yes." Judge Calder nodded. First Harbor Bank's fraud unit indicates a HELOC disbursement secured by this property was directed to an account linked to that entity. Gavin's jaw tightened. Travis stood. "Your Honor, we contest." Judge Calder lifted a hand. "Sit." Travis sat. Judge Calder's gaze stayed on Gavin. The bank also indicates the signer was male, presenting altered identification with Ms. Hart's name and an invalid notary seal. Additionally, attempted online profile changes originated from IP addresses associated with your business service provider. The room went still. Gavin's face drained slightly, like the blood didn't know where to go. "That's impossible," Gavin said, voice tight. "She's lying." Judge Calder didn't look at me. She looked at the bank's letterhead, Banks do not submit impossible in sealed files without documentation, she said. They document, they report, and the allegations here are serious. Then she turned to Lauren. Counsel, what relief are you seeking? She asked. Lauren's voice didn't shake. Denial of the motion to compel sale, she said. Protective orders, attorney's fees, enforcement of the partition waiver, and referral to the county prosecutor for review of fraud and identity theft. Referral. That word hit Gavin like a punch. Judge Calder nodded slowly. Motion to compel sale denied. Protective order extended. No contact with Ms. Hart except through counsel. No contact with the bank. No contact with the recorder's office. Attorney's fees granted, and this matter will be referred for criminal review. Gavin's mouth opened. He tried to speak. Judge Calder's voice sharpened. Mr. Rourke, you do not get to threaten possession of a home while simultaneously appearing in a fraud file tied to that same home. Gavin stood frozen, caught between rage and panic. In the hallway afterward, he leaned close to me, eyes wild. You think you did something, he hissed. You think a judge makes it true. It's still my house. Lauren stepped between us, voice ice. Back up, she said. Gavin sneered. She can't erase me. Lauren didn't blink. You erased yourself the day you signed, she said. Gavin flinched. What did you just say? Lauren's eyes held him. You don't even know what you signed, do you? And that was the spark, because Gavin's entire confidence was built on one belief. The house was his because his name was on it. But he hadn't checked. Not really. Not recently. Not since he'd been too busy telling himself the world worked like his ego. In January, the prosecutor's office opened a case. In February, warrants were executed for bank records, IP logs, and business accounts. And in March, the big twist hit like a trap snapping shut at exactly the moment Gavin still believed he could wriggle away. Lauren called me into her office and slid a document across her desk. This, she said, tapping the page, is the title report updated after the bank's internal actions and the recorder's review. I stared. It listed me as sole titled owner, with Gavin's prior interest extinguished by the corrective deed and subsequent recorded instrument. It also included the partition waiver, the reimbursement schedule as a personal obligation, and a note that any attempted encumbrance by Gavin would be invalid and flagged. Wait, I whispered. So, he really isn't, Lauren nodded. He hasn't been an owner the way he thinks, for years, she said. His name not being on the current title is not new. What's new is that he finally forced a court and a bank to put it in front of him. I felt my chest tighten. Gavin had been screaming my house while committing fraud against a property he legally couldn't control the way he wanted. And here's the cruel irony. The day he tried to use the bank to steal equity, he created the exact investigation that exposed the truth he'd refused to read. The day he realized the house was never his was the day the system showed him, in ink, that his belief wasn't law. He didn't accept it quietly. Of course he didn't. He spiraled. He called from blocked numbers. He left voicemails that shifted between pleading and threats. We can fix this, he whispered at 2:11 a.m. Just sign the sale. Just sign. Don't make this bigger. Then, 30 minutes later, his voice returned, sharp. You're ruining me. You hear me? You're ruining me. I saved every voicemail. Lauren filed every violation. The prosecutor expanded charges. Attempted mortgage fraud, identity theft, forgery, filing false instruments. Gavin's business accounts were frozen pending investigation. Clients backed away. Credit lines tightened. And Gavin, who had built his identity on being untouchable, started showing up looking tired. By late April, he took a plea deal. No prison, but probation, restitution, community service, and a felony record that followed him like a shadow. He didn't lose his freedom completely, but he lost what mattered more to him: his image. The image that made people nod when he said, "I'm on the deed." Because now anyone who looked him up would see the truth. And the power reversal began showing itself everywhere. At Riley's school, the office stopped smiling politely when his name appeared. They followed the custody order to the letter. At the bank, my accounts were locked down and protected with fraud flags. At the county recorder, a permanent alert was added. At family court, Judge Calder signed an order stating clearly that Gavin had no right to present himself as an owner or threaten possession. He could no longer use his voice as leverage. Only paper mattered now. And the final moment, the moment that felt like a movie scene but was really just the law doing its job, came in early June. Gavin still had tools and boxes in my garage. He'd left them there intentionally. An excuse to stop by. An excuse to hover. Lauren petitioned for a sheriff-supervised property retrieval with a strict no trespass order attached. The court granted it. Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m., the sheriff SUV rolled onto Briarwood Lane. My heart jumped anyway, because trauma doesn't care who the sheriff is for. Riley stood behind me at the window, clutching my shirt. "Is someone taking us?" she whispered. I swallowed. "No," I said softly. "They're making sure the rules are followed." The deputy knocked. Professional. "Ms. Hart?" "Yes." "Mr. Rourke has 15 minutes, he said. "Garage only, no contact. If he violates, he's removed." I nodded, throat tight. Then Gavin's truck pulled up. He stepped out slowly, not in a suit, not smiling, not performing. Just jeans, a jacket, and a face that looked like it had finally learned what consequences feel like. The deputy repeated the rules. Gavin nodded without meeting my eyes. He walked to the garage and started carrying boxes, a drill case, a toolbox, a folding ladder, files, old junk. He moved fast, like he wanted the moment to end before it burned into his pride. Riley whispered, "Is Dad mad?" I exhaled slowly. "Dad is dealing with consequences," I said quietly. Gavin heard that. He looked up. And that's when it happened, the day he realized. Not because he saw the sheriff, not because he saw me standing there, but because he saw the deputy holding a document, and he saw my name on it, and he saw his own name placed exactly where it belonged now. Not as an owner, as a restricted party, a man with limits. He stared at the paper like it had betrayed him. "What is that?" he demanded, voice rough. The deputy didn't blink. "No trespass order," he said. "Property retrieval conditions, garage only." Gavin's jaw clenched. "This is my house." The deputy's voice stayed calm, almost bored. "No, sir," he said. "It's not. It's Ms. Hart's residence." Gavin froze. The words hit him harder than any insult I could have thrown, because they weren't said by me. They were said by the law. Gavin turned toward me, eyes burning. "Tell him," he snapped. "Tell him I'm on the deed." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said the truth, softly, like reading from a record. "You're not," I said. "Not anymore. Not the way you think." His face twisted. "That's a lie." The deputy held up the document slightly. "Title and court order are clear," he said. "Keep moving." Gavin's breath came faster. He looked around like the neighborhood itself might disagree with the deputy and save him. But no one came. No one clapped for his performance. No one validated his fantasy. Because fantasies don't hold up against county records. He swallowed hard and went back to carrying boxes. Halfway through, he muttered, "You tricked me." I watched him, steady. "I didn't trick you," I said quietly. "You refused to read." He stopped carrying, turned again, eyes sharp. I paid into this. Lauren's voice echoed in my mind, reimbursement schedule, so I said the sentence that ended his narrative. "You have a payout schedule," I said. "You don't have ownership." His mouth opened, but no words came out. Because he knew, somewhere deep, that he'd signed those papers and laughed and walked away, believing paper didn't matter. And now paper was taking everything from him. Riley squeezed my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "why is Dad so mad?" I swallowed. "Because he thought something was his," I said softly, "and he just learned it wasn't." Gavin carried the last box to his truck and slammed the tailgate. The deputy checked his watch. "Time," he said. Gavin stood there, breathing hard, looking at my porch, my windows, the oak tree, the swing, like he was trying to force the universe to admit he belonged. Then he looked at Riley. For a moment, just a moment, his face softened, like he remembered how to be a father instead of an enemy. "Bye, Peanut," he said quietly. Riley hesitated, then lifted her fingers in a small wave. "Bye." Gavin swallowed. Then he looked at me one last time. "This isn't fair," he said, voice bitter. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just said the truth that had become my backbone. "Fair wasn't your goal," I said softly. "Control was." His jaw clenched. Then he climbed into his truck. Before he drove away, he rolled down the window and said the line he'd used like a weapon for years. "I'm on the deed," he said, like he could conjure it back by saying it. I stepped forward just enough to be heard, not enough to be vulnerable. And I answered with the only power that mattered now. "The record disagrees," I said. Gavin stared, lips parting, like he wanted to scream, like he wanted to pull the world apart until it fit him again. But the deputy was there. The order was there. The bank was there, in invisible systems and fraud reports and flagged accounts. And Gavin's own plea record was already stamped. So he drove away. The sheriff SUV pulled off a minute later. And when the street went quiet, the quiet felt different, not tense, not waiting, just clean. That night, Riley and I sat on the porch swing with lemonade in plastic cups. The kind of simple moment that used to feel impossible when Gavin's threats hung over the house like weather. Riley leaned against me and said, "Mom?" "Yeah, baby." "Is the house really ours?" My throat tightened. "Yes," I said. "It is." "Forever?" she asked. I smiled, real this time. "As long as we want," I said. She nodded slowly, then whispered, "Dad said you were stealing." I stroked her hair. "Dad says things when he's scared," I said softly. "But he doesn't get to decide what's true." Riley looked up at me, eyes searching. "Who decides?" I thought about April's voice at the bank. I thought about Judge Calder opening the file. I thought about the deputy saying, "No, sir, it's not." And I said the simplest version of the lesson. "The record decides," I said, "the truth on paper." Riley nodded like she was putting it in a safe place inside herself. And as the sun sank behind the oak tree, I realized the day Gavin realized the house was never his wasn't the day he lost a building. It was the day he lost the belief that he could own people by owning paperwork. He had tried to make my life a negotiation. He had tried to make my home a hostage. He had tried to make my child afraid of stability. And in the end, It wasn't my anger that stopped him. It wasn't my tears. It wasn't my voice. It was the quiet, boring, unromantic thing that holds the world together when people like Gavin try to tear it apart. A record, a file, a stamp, a system that finally said out loud what I had been living in silence for years. No, sir, it's not yours.